Welcome to a second round edition of Twos and Threes, a Utah Jazz podcast. Doug, we're not just talking about the playoffs. We're talking about the second round of the playoffs. Some people like to call it the conference semifinals. I've always thought that was a little weird. But hey, it makes it closer to the final sounding. We're here, and, it turns out in the Western Conference, it was chalk in the first round. Who would have thought that in this weird COVID year where everybody's like, yada, yada, health with this, that, the other? It was chalk. And guess what, Doug? If it's chalk the whole damn way, I'll be pretty happy. Because that means the Jazz are the NBA champions. So here we are. How are you doing? How are you feeling right now?
I'm feeling great. A gentleman's sweep of the Grizzlies sitting here. We actually... in all transparency, we just did segment 2 before segment 1 because we're that transparent on this podcast.
We're not transparent.
So we're sitting here with our chests puffed out a little bit. We've got a fun segment 2, and I feel great. I'm so excited, Mark. Cool. I mean, like every NBA game, I have to watch at least a little bit of it because I'm just so excited because it's one game closer to when the Jazz are playing.
Oh, man, the toughest thing is just waiting. I do want to give one asterisk. This is a shout out to Logan Cox from the Hitting the High Notes podcast. He took umbrage with people calling this a gentleman's sweep because a gentleman's sweep, in his view, definitionally should be you win your 2 at home, the other team gets 1 on the road, and then you tidy them off in game 5. So I don't know if this was like a Johnny-come-lately sweep or whatever, but the Jazz, after losing game 1, made quick work of the Memphis Grizzlies in 5 games. So if you want to call it gentleman's sweep, that's fine. I thought it was kind of a funny distinction. But let's talk about it a little more, Doug, because the last time we podcast, the Jazz, I believe, were up 2-1.
2-1, Mark. And guess what? We ended off with a 4-1 series victory over the Grizzlies. Started a week ago today. It's Monday right now. The Jazz beat the Grizzlies 120-113 in game 4. So that was at Memphis. And then the Jazz beat the Grizzlies 126-110 on Wednesday in Utah. It was really like 200-0 or something like that. But then we let them score some points in the end. So
then we brought in Jarrell and Jeans Brantley, and they made a little bit of a run. It's fine. The Jazz, I think Memphis outscored the Jazz by like 14 points in the fourth quarter to lose by 16. Was never, in other words, it was never close. I think one thing that was crazy, and David Locke was kind of harping on this stat, the Jazz, as close as there were close moments in games 2, 3, and 4, but the Jazz were leading in all but like less than 8 minutes or something like that in those games. And I thought that was maybe the most impressive thing, especially in that game 4, where, Memphis tried to make a rally in game 3 too. And the Jazz kind of took the life out of them. But I was thinking, let's just take some takeaways from this. Our segment 2 that we recorded first is going to be a preview of the next series. And we have a wonderful guest on who is our, podcast Mavs fan insider, who just suffered through being on the other side of this Clippers team that is just so hate-worthy. Sports hate, everybody calm down.
Right.
So sports hate-worthy and miserable. And so we're going to get his insights on what we have to look forward to. But right now, let's bask a little bit in this. And I've got takeaways. They're a little more heavily focused on the last 2 games, but kind of broader. And maybe we can just, we can ping pong back and forth with them. What do you say?
I like it.
If you haven't had a chance, check out the Jazz Pod Co-op on Twitter. It's a group of podcasts with like-minded people that just want to share their opinions on the Jazz. Here's a preview. Mark and Doug Hinsey on the 2s and 3s.
The weird things about dude shots is like my favorite like NBA subcategory of thought.
That definitely gets Mark going for sure.
and like, or they're like the length of their arms affecting something. I'm like, whether they jump off of 1 foot or 2 foot.
Right.
Like,
Emily and McCoy on the Jazzagals.
If anything, that video also reminded me like how just a few inches difference it was between us being on one side versus the other. You know, like,
well, we all know a few inches can make a difference.
Who, Logan and Jared on hitting the high notes.
I don't even care if they're hurt.
I mean, we're not going to dance on any injuries, but yes.
No, I buy.
Same.
I buy.
Same.
I can't actually make any promises. I don't even care if it's a fluke or we cheat. I don't even care. I'll take it.
If you're not cheating, you're not trying, right?
That's what they say.
And Brian and McCade on home court press.
With Boyan, Memphis is really struggling to shoot. So giving Boyan to the Grizzlies and then having the Grizzlies forward our first-round pick onto another team, if you can get Boyan a first-round pick and then get Memphis to throw in a first-round pick in DA and take Boyan, a lot of possibilities open for a guy like John Collins.
Yay!
You want to go first, or should I? What do you got?
I'm going to go first because I feel like this is the most obvious from the last 4 games. Donovan Mitchell's so good. So good, Mark. He is so good at the game of basketball.
Pause. Can I just read you the first 3 words in my? I've got Memphis takeaways, and the first 3 words are Donovan Mitchell, superstar. Which I realize this is such a sports talk radio podcasty way to start, but what do you want from me, Doug? You had a similar thing. What do you want from me? Tell me more about it. You could talk to me about Donovan Mitchell in this playoff series. We could make that a podcast, not even just a podcast episode. We could start a podcast called Donovan Mitchell's just assertion of dominance against the Memphis Grizzlies. I'd have many episodes worth of content.
It just felt like any time that Donovan really wanted to put himself out there, or any time that there was any question of, oh, are the Grizzlies about to go on a run? It was like, oh, no, wait. Actually, I'm Donovan Mitchell, and this isn't going to happen. And I don't know. Game 4 and Game 5, especially ending the second quarter, was it? Third quarter? Second quarter, I think, where Donovan just went off and then had the buzzer beater at the very end.
It was delicious.
Just so fun.
Especially, so there's this 2-play sequence, which was a microcosm of the whole thing. Other than that, his passing was also sublime. And he had the 30-point, 10-assist game, which was great. So TNT can finally dub him a superstar under Kenny Smith's completely made up arbitrary rules where you have to get a double-double or else it doesn't count. Anyways, he comes down, and I'm explaining this for no good reason, because if you listen to this podcast, you already know exactly what the heck I'm talking about. But he comes down. Dylan Brooks is just guarding him as annoying as possible. And Donovan's just like playing with his food, kind of. Turns around, hits this turnaround 3 right in his face. Amazing. Dylan Brooks shoves him on the way down. Donovan turns around, tells him to kindly leave the stadium, and in more choice language than that. Crowd's going wild. It's awesome. Right after that, Donovan gets it, has an advantage on Brooks, waits for him to come just so that he can just do it in his face one more time, and hits that one at the buzzer of halftime.
Yep.
And it was beautiful. But I mean, our friend of the pod, Sarah Todd, a beat writer of the Deseret News, tweeted something. I'm going off of memory here, but I just loved it so much. It was like, this is Donovan's symphony. And he's like a maestro. This is his symphony in major D or whatever, which didn't even make sense, but was really funny. And I just thought that's what it felt like. And it felt like that right from the beginning when he came in game 2. I mean, he just, to me, I mean, we talked about this in our segment 2 that we recorded first, but I think a big key to this coming up series is going to be the fact that he's sort of playing on a Luka Doncic type level where he's just so in control. And so if you're going to say, we're going to switch and you got to beat us one-on-one, I feel pretty good about Donovan having the ball in his hands. He was awesome. He distributed the ball well. He trusted his teammates. He made some great passes to Rudy. He made great passes to 3-point shooters. I thought he played hard defensively. And I don't know, next level superstar.
Yeah, I think that's great. What was your next point?
I wanted to say, well, I'm going to save this one, actually. I want to talk about Royce O'Neal, Doug. I think one of the biggest Jazz fan concerns coming into the playoffs was my guy, Royce O'Neal, and justifiably so. He was in a funk. He was in a funk shooting the ball, and he wasn't and which led to him just not shooting the ball. And in this series, right off the bat, game 1, he came out firing. In every game, it was 4 for 6, 4 for 7, 3 for 5 from 3. And do you know what else? So that was so key. He shot it willingly and he shot it well. And more importantly was the willingly part, because it's just so important for the Jazz offense that he shoots when he's open. But secondarily, he was everywhere. I just thought defensively, and this is going to tack onto another one of my takeaways, but the Jazz were conceding the mid-range, but they got a little more frisky as time went on, and he was one of the reasons. He just jumped passing lanes. He rebounded aggressively. He's been maybe the second most important rebounder on the team the whole year. And to me, it was just like, you know how emotional I get about Royce. He played a year in Europe. He basically came into camp where nobody thought he was going to make the team, at least, like fan-wise. And he just played himself on. And I just love the Royce O'Neal come up, and I love everything about it. I thought he was in games 4 and 5, he was one of the best performers, and you could have easily handed him a game ball at the end of either one of those games.
I love that. I could not agree more. That wasn't one of the points that I had originally thought of, but now I'm smacking myself metaphorically in the face.
I tweeted, this is the Royce O'Neal game in at least 2 games this series. And if you told me I was going to do that before, I would have bet the house on the Jazz winning the series.
I think I also tweeted, even though I still have one more final tomorrow. It's very chill, but as in my finals week, I think I tweeted early as well, this is a Royce O'Neal game. I kind of came out of my Twitter dust.
You had to. Royce was like, hey, can you pause on your finals for a hot second, Doug? And give me a tweet, because I'm putting it all out there. And you did. So good on both of you.
Yeah. But I have to say, in these last 2 games, also a guy that's been in a funk and has been getting a lot of flack just because he's also so consistently awesome. Jordan Clarkson. Can we not give some praise to JC for this past 2 games?
6. Yeah.
6, man. Let's go. Jordan's been awesome, and we're really going to need him in this series, especially if Mike is injured, if he is or isn't playing. He's such a creator, whether it's in the paint, mid-range, from 3. His last game, I mean, he's a volume shooter, right? That's nothing novel to say, but I think in the last 2 games, he's kind of found his stroke, and it comes from him doing the patented Bojan getting back on track, which is starting off in the paint. And I think that's leading to him feeling more comfortable, and he had 24 the last 2 games. So
his third quarter in game 4, I think it was possibly the series clinching sequence. I mean, they were making their run, and yeah, just like you said, he's a volume shooter, and he just got him up, and then boom, third quarter, game 4, he went on a run. And then I thought he was similar kind of thing in game 5, although the Jazz just buried them so fast. But yeah, I'm with you. I love Jordan. I think you're totally right that this is a series coming up with the Clippers and the switching where his shot creation and his just shot volume are both going to be super key. And he was awesome. God, I mean, this is kind of funny how this is the takeaways is we're just like saying a dude's name and how much we like him. But The other one on my list is Bojan Bogdanovic. But I have some nuance to this because, for one, last year we didn't have Bogey in the first round of the playoffs. A lot of us thought, he was a difference-making kind of a person. He had a real tough first half of the season, first 3 quarters of the season probably even. Came back. Was he going to be able to score with Mike in the lineup? Yada, yada. Guess what, Doug? 18 points a game on 49, 43, 90 shooting. Basically 50, 40, 90. I thought he made huge, timely shots that quelled runs and sort of held the fort. And this is part of what the 20-50-50 rule is, Doug, is that people are like, yeah, but they just made it. Yeah, that's part of it. We can go on a run and get 12 points in 30 seconds because we just shoot the cover off the ball. And you can't go on a run like that on us because we have stone cold shooters who are going to do it. And honorable mention to George Niang, who didn't even get on my list, but he made some of those. But Bogey just several times did that. And all that's to say is, Doug, the thing that impressed me more than any of that, Game 5, 8 rebounds, 4 assists. From Bojan Bogdanovic, 8 rebounds, 4 assists. Did you even realize that? I didn't realize that at the time. I thought he's passing well. He's doing a shout out to the home court press who I heard do that in the recap after, and then I had to go back and look at the box score because I just didn't even know that Bojan could get 8 rebounds in a game. But what an effort. And I thought he was great. I think he's going to be important again in this series. I'm terrified of him dribbling in this series, I'll be honest. But I think he can do a lot if he catches the ball in the post. And I think his 3-point shooting is going to be key.
I like it. And just to bounce off of you, different players, you always say this guy because he's your favorite since Karl Malone. I would say early series, Jonas Valanciunas a couple times got Rudy's goat. Is that a saying? Get your goat?
I think it is.
I don't know if I use that in an appropriate context, but I kind of I tend to do that in the podcast.
You convinced me. Yeah, you convinced me.
I would say he got Rudy's goat. And saying that a second time, it sounded right. Got his goat. And I feel like Rudy did a lot better later on in the series. I mean, I think he played great the whole series, but I think he got comfortable, did his thing, and I'm really excited to see him play against the small ball lineup of the Clippers.
Yeah,
we talk about it in the next segment a little bit, but I think Rudy played awesome, and I had to say it before you.
No, I'm glad you did. He was my second one, and I saved it for later just because it felt like whatever. So I'm glad you did. This is what I'd say. Rudy Gobert's not a playoff player. Rudy Gobert averages 14 points a game, 13 and a half rebounds, and 2 blocks in the regular season this year, and was by far and away the defensive player of the year. Playoffs, 17 points a game in this first round series, right there with 13 rebounds, 3.2 blocks, upped it, and had 2 massive fourth quarters in games 3 and 4 in particular. I think it was those. Maybe it was 2. He had that 10-point fourth quarter. I think it was in game 3 to just take the life out of them. And I think maybe it was game 2 that Mike was surgically getting him alley-oops. I can't remember which one of the 2. But this is my point, because I've listened to several national podcasts in the last couple of weeks about this. Doug. I mean, Chris Vernon, who I really like, he's a Memphis fan. He's on the Ringer. He actually retweeted something. I tweeted to chide me the other day, but whatever. I don't even care. He kept saying afterwards that the drop big thing is not going to be sustainable with Rudy against other teams, because what if somebody can shoot better than John? I was in that. Guess what? Rudy, like the Jazz were conceding John Morant threes off the pick and roll because John Morant's not good at that shot yet. The Jazz were conceding John Morant in the mid range because they'd rather that than him kicking out to shooters for threes. The Jazz won in 5. Rudy was dominant. I'm not even a little worried about that, and I think this next matchup is going to highlight him even more. I just thought it was a ho hum. Gentleman sweep, even though whether you call that or not, type of an effort from Rudy. They didn't have the personnel to really challenge him. Jonas Valanciunas, he is a good player, and that was kind of a fun battle to watch. I thought Rudy handled it well. But yeah, I mean, I just thought he was solid. He raised his game from the regular season numbers. The Jazz gave up a ton of points, but the Jazz scored a ton of points. And I thought he was great. So I just thought it was another series on the just killing the Rudy gets played off the floor playoff narrative, which is a dumb narrative. All right, Doug. So my other one here before last one that kind of feeds off of that point that I just made was just Mike Conley. And this is the bittersweet one right here because Mike Conley was masterful and arguably the best player of the whole series. I think Donovan played at the highest level, but man, was Mike good. Everything I said about Bogey hitting timely shots, even more so with Mike. And more than that, he just controlled the game. And so many of those early fourth quarters, he was just crisp and sharp and distributed the ball well. And the logic of him and Mike, the dude shoots his playoff 3-point percentages in his 2 seasons with the Jazz. It's 2 series, but it's out of control. He was 53% from 3 for the series. And it didn't feel like an outlier because the Jazz are so good and he's so good at moving it. He was just shooting open threes. And I kind of expect him to make half of them, you know?
Yeah.
It didn't feel like a fluky thing. Thought he was fantastic. I think he is going to play a big role in the next series, and I hope that big role is not on the bench hurting us in that sense or making me feel bad. But I just think he's really just sort of at the peak of his powers and doing exceeding what I would have expected from him on the Jazz, but I think doing everything that Dennis Lindsey and Justin Zanuck and Quinn Snyder would have hoped. He was awesome. You called it at the beginning of the series about him playing against Memphis and this going to be his thing. He just took everything Dylan Brooks wanted to throw at him. It didn't even matter or whatever. You know, he was great. That was a long way of saying he was great.
Five home games for Mike Conley.
Yep.
It was awesome.
He
was so great. What's the GIF or GIF? I think GIF is actually the real way to say it. Isn't that how you usually?
Yeah, it's the technical way to say it.
The GIF of, is it Leonardo DiCaprio that like it bites his lips and rolls his eye backwards and he loves something? I can't.
Yeah.
That was like me every time Mike shot a three. I was just, I'm kind of a quiet watcher. Like I sit and I think. It's like every sound and emotion is in my brain.
It's like a beautiful mind above your head, though. Just like numbers are rolling.
Yeah, it's just all dancing around my head. But man, there were just so many. I mean, we could name literally everyone on the roster, Mark. Because guess what? We won 4 straight games, and it was great. And the fourth quarter, I would say, of game 1 was a really good comeback for the Jazz as well. So we watched a lot of great basketball, and there were so many times where I was just like, can this team even be beaten? If you think back last podcast, I said like there could be a bad way or a good way to look at the first couple of games. Like either we just can't stop Ja and Dylan Brooks, or they're literally playing their best basketball and we're still beating them. And I think it was the second one. I think they played their best basketball and it kind of ran out maybe a little bit especially in game 5, but this team is just good, Mark. And I need to go on a quick rant. Can I go on a quick rant?
Please. I'm
going to tell you, we're talking about the Jazz Grizzlies series. I'm going to tell you right now, forward facing, I'm so excited for this Clippers series. Like I'm so ready for this to happen tomorrow. I wanted to play the Mavs. And I love my friend McKay, our friend McKay. He's in the next segment. I think that because I watched a lot of these games, and I just feel like the Jazz would have picked apart the Mavs. And guess what? I think they're going to pick apart the Clippers too. Yeah. But just put yourself in Doug Hinsey, slight mustache, baby scruff, in the words of our Grandma Matthews.
40 pounds less than me right now. I'm there.
Yeah, that's due to a chronic disease though. So.
Wow.
And I'm driving home. Huge presentation the past Monday. And this is on Saturday, so I'm mulling over. Saturday? Is that right? I can't remember. But I'm driving home from school, and it's a Saturday, and I'm like, please, just like, oh no, wait, yeah, this is this past Saturday. I'm driving home. I listen to the local Portland sports radio because a lot of times it's national media, anyways. But a local guy going over the NBA, and he says, this may be the year, because it's so wide open of who could win the finals. So this may be the year and he went through every team, and he said, if the Jazz win the championship, then it could be one of the worst teams to win a championship. And I just about parked my car and called into this radio station. This is potentially the worst take I've ever heard, Mark. It's so bad. He said, well, maybe back to the Pistons or the Mavs. And then he was like, no, Dirk was a superstar, so they weren't that good. It's like,
those teams.
This could be literally the best team that wins a championship, Mark. The best team. You say it. This is your Twitter go-to. Best team in the league kind of thing. Donovan Mitchell is a superstar. Rudy Gobert, all NBA, also superstar in our book. This team is so good. And if anyone says that this is the worst team, they are so stupid and should be immediately fired, or their opinion should be null void because, oh man, that's why I'm saying I'm so glad to play the Clippers. I don't want to hear any crap saying like Jazz didn't play the Lakers, Jazz didn't play the Clippers.
Yeah,
we're going into LA and
you.
we're getting a big W. That's all I have to say.
Doug, crush it, distill it, put it in a syringe, whatever you do. I want that energy injected into my body right now. I love it. Yeah, no, I'm totally with you. Do you know what my last thing on my list was, Doug? We were saying all these things, Memphis takeaways, players' names, good things. My last thing was Jazz being completely ignored. That's my sentence at the end. And I was going to say the same thing. It's funny because I've listened to several podcasts where they've rattled off all the teams and don't even mention the Jazz.
They forget the Jazz.
They don't even mention the Jazz. At that point, that's so fun. People just don't watch, and they don't want to watch. And I mean, I've heard people on the things like, we don't want Utah. Can you imagine Utah? Like, I was going to say one thing about the Memphis thing is like people are saying, does what the Jazz did in the season, can it translate? Yeah, it was exactly the thing. The Jazz won 80% of the games, and the one game they lost by 3 after making a big comeback and doing it because that's just what they did. It was a frustrating game, so frustrating. But guess what? The net result is the Jazz are on to the next round. The Jazz, that's the so funny thing is like net rating. We've talked about all this stuff. Historically good. They were awesome all year. This has been one of the best teams. When Chris Vernon retweeted me, he said something like, I've never seen shooting like this, talking about the first quarter of the Jazz, yada, yada. And I retweeted and I just said, I've seen it several times this year from this team. And then he was like, no, you haven't. And he was like, and he quoted the numbers like, this is the most points a quarter. And whatever, maybe not that exact thing. But the point was this, Doug. I love Riley Geisman, who's another Jazz fan who retweeted, and he gave stats for how many times the Jazz just blew out a team by 20 in a quarter all season. And he said, this was a Wednesday. And do you know what, Doug? That was a Wednesday. It was a really good one. I mean, maybe was it the best quarter? I don't know, but it wasn't an outlier quarter to me. If you watch the Jazz this year, that's what they do. That's what they do. They bury you with an avalanche of threes and they shut you off for a period, and then they move you along and they get on with their business winning. Look, are they going to win? I don't know, but I love it. It's delicious. I saw Max Kellerman tweet this thing that was like, the NBA can't be happy. This was when the Clippers were making a lose to the Mavs and like, no LA, it's going to be the Jazz Suns or the Jazz Nuggets. And I just went off. I quote tweeted him 15 times, all as sarcastic as I could. I was like, but what about the league? Will the league fail? How will we survive this? And then I got salty and I was like, I hope that by the end of our run, I hope this is the first of a championship run and that by the end of it, they're tape delaying the finals again. I hope you can only find the NBA once we're done with it on beIN Sports on Sundays. I was like, it was delicious. I was like, let's win. I hope it's the lowest rated finals in the history of the thing. And we're the best team. Because I don't even care because I'm full embracing the best case scenario here is just the Jazz are the modern Spurs. Like, do you think the Spurs cared? Yeah, they got a little mad that people weren't caring. But guess what? They won 5 championships and were the best team. And people were like, they're boring. And guess what? They weren't boring. They were awesome.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm with you. I would just say, for all those reasons, I mean, it would have been a similar thing with Dallas just because Luka is so ballyhooed and beloved and everybody's like all over Luka Doncic all the time. Rightly so. The dude's awesome. But the Jazz would have mopped the floor with them. And then later in retrospect, it'd be like, well, they weren't that good. And it'd be like, well, they got Memphis, they got them, and then they got Phoenix, who's, by the way, the second best team in the West.
Phoenix is so good, man.
So here's the thing. it's going to be an awesome run. But yeah, I'm with you. I like look, Doug. Maybe they're not, but I think the Jazz are the best team. They have home court advantage against this Clippers team, and they have it against everybody the rest of the way. We'll worry about Brooklyn when we get there. They seem like a sleeping giant, but guess what? They haven't played an offense remotely like the Jazz's offense yet with their porous defense. So anyways, hopefully we get there. But this Clippers team, that's what I kept trying to come back to. And now it's like, oh, but the Clippers, now they went through their perfect yada yada. This Clippers team almost just lost to the Mavs without winning a home game. And this Mavs team wasn't good. They're fine. Luka's awesome. They were clearly a tier below. So I don't know. I'm ready for it. I'm with you. I'm embracing the full Jazz heel thing. I mean, here's the thing that's funny about it to me is the Jazz are the most fun team to watch. It literally is like, people can't imagine something until it happens. Sarah Todd was so right when she came on and talked about the first Warriors run. I remember that, nobody believed it. And then even when they won, they were like, oh, well, injuries, yada, yada, all this stuff. Whatever, man. The Jazz are really, really good. They have a really good chance. If you don't think they're fun to watch, I just don't understand it. And let's go get it. It'll be delicious to end a second Paul George era with the team.
Good.
It'll be great. Ty Lue, I'm sorry, I don't buy it. Maybe it's whatever. It's just like up and down the board. If your X Factor Game 7 wild card is pulling Luke Kennard off your bench, sign me up for that team. I want to play that team because we're going to beat that team.
So good.
One last thing on this too, Doug. These dudes tanked the end of the season to play the Jazz in the second round. Now, they did it to not play the Lakers, but if Rudy, if you're listening to this, awesome, man. Hey.
Welcome.
Welcome. We love you. They wanted you, man. They wanted you in the second round. Donovan Mitchell, they wanted you. Let's go make them, eat that foot that they just put in their mouth. I don't like anything about this Clippers team really, and I'm glad the Jazz are playing them because they're going to be fun to root against.
Yep. Just watching the Clippers and the Mavericks play, I'm just ready for Steve Ballmer to be sitting in his chair quietly, humbly watching his team lose, because he gets so stoked anytime anything good happens, and I'm just excited to see the opposite.
Yeah.
But like you said, with people don't believe it until they see it. It was in a Clippers Mavs game where on TNT where they talked about where Kenny did his infamous. He said they were talking about the Mavs, but he said, "Well, the Mavs have no chance in winning a championship," which isn't a hefty take. He said, "We've never seen him do it," and then they went on to say the classic thing that they always say. We haven't seen any championship team just come out after losing first and second rounds and win the finals. And then Draymond went, "Well, we did our very first time," quoting Sarah Todd. I'm sure he was.
Yeah.
And
Draymond's good, by the way. He's a good commentator.
He is, and that just kind of shut them up. So I don't want to hear TNT say that once about the Jazz because they've already. The Warriors did it. Sarah Todd was there. Sarah Todd is here now.
Well, the Mavericks also did it too at that time. Plenty of teams have done like that. It's a stupid take. It's a stupid take. And here's the thing: at the end of the day, honestly, this is why it was both of our first takeaways for the Memphis series was that we hadn't seen him play for a while, and then he came back and played, and it was, oh yeah, actually. It's all silly because the reason people say that is they don't think we have a super duper star, like a traditional whatever. And yeah, our team's awesome. Yeah, we have the best 9-man rotation in the NBA. I think people concede that. I've heard Bill Simmons and other people say it on podcasts, arguably the best top to bottom team. Also, Donovan Mitchell, what are we even talking about? He's a superstar. He is a superstar. Like, what else do you want? He's not Chauncey Billups. And Chauncey Billups is awesome. And the Pistons won. Donovan Mitchell's way better than Chauncey Billups. Like, what are we even talking about? If Luka Doncic has won, Donovan Mitchell has won. I mean, I'm sorry. He's going to own the thing. I don't know. I'm just pumped. Now I'm just pumped and I'm going to just jabber crazy crap. Afterwards, Doug, if we lose to the Clippers, which we very well could because they have some very good players. I don't trust they're very good players, but they could rise up. Obviously, Kawhi has a track record. Maybe I'll look silly, but this is really what I believe now. And I think the Jazz are the better team. The better team doesn't always win, but I really hope they do this time. And I think they will. What's your thing? How many games?
I'm going to say, honestly, I'm going to say Jazz in 6, maybe Jazz in 5. That is like how I feel in my heart. People are going to say, I mean, people come to this podcast for positivity, and that is what we rain upon you. But man, just watching the Jazz, I really like tried to watch the Clippers Mavs series at the same time. And I just feel like the Jazz are so good. The Clippers have Kawhi. They have some other guys that aren't bad. But I'm just all sorts of believing. I'm going to say 5 or 6. 6 just because we could use a longer series just for fun. Hopefully the Sun series, I haven't even seen what the score is right now. I think they're playing right now. It's probably not done yet. But
it was close at half. Yeah, Doug, here's the thing for me. I want so badly to say 5. The thing that makes me nervous is game 1 because I don't know what's going on with Mike Conley, and I just don't. The Jazz have been off a little. Here's the thing. So I believe if they win game 1, they're going to win it in 5 games. I have a hard time with 6 for some reason. I think they can. I think they can go into LA, lamest home court advantage in the NBA, and win on the road. There's something about Kawhi Leonard over there that if it's not 5, I think there's a decent chance it's 7. So I'm almost leaning that way. 6 feels like the right number, other than the fact that that's like the home, whatever. You're probably right at 6. I think 5 is, I guess it's just a real possibility. If it was like, what's the probability of like each outcome? I honestly feel like it's like 30% chance of this thing's over in 5 games for the Jazz, like 35% chance it's over in 6, and 34 and 7 or something like that, which is a lame way to say. I'm going with you. Let's go 6. We're gonna beat them on their own home court to win this.
Donovan in LA, man, can't beat that.
Yeah. I'm stoked about it. We're going to talk about it some more with McKay. So let's jump to that segment. But just know when I'm editing this later, I'm just going to listen to you give that rant over and over and over again.
Oh man, I was juiced. I was like, what is this? How does this guy have a job?
Yeah. Oh man, we're going to find him. I'm just kidding. All right. Well, let's go to our next segment. Hey, it's Mark. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. It's the way we make this podcast. Let me explain. First off, Anchor is free. Second, it has creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. It even allows you to record it with people remotely like Doug and I do. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many other platforms, including all the platforms that you hear 2s and 3s. You can make money from your podcast using Anchor with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So listen, you have a voice, and there are conversations that you should contribute to. Do it. Start your own podcast. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Yay! So, Douglas, we now turn with an eye to the future, but as we look to the future, the best way to learn about the future is to reflect on the past. I don't know. But we needed some expert help. Obviously, you and I have been hyper-focused on Jazz Grizzlies in the first round. Now, granted, we had a nice little layaway as the Jazz were the first team in the West to get through their series. And we sort of jumped on this Clippers Mavericks thing with greater focus in the last few days. But we thought, what better than to bring on onto the pod a past guest, our Mavs expert and insider, and easily one of the 3 best high school basketball players who's been on our podcast before. That's probably too conservative of a ranking. But it's our friend McKay Richens. What's up, man? We gave you a 2-day, basically, at least a 36-hour grieving period after the heartbreaking Game 7 loss. But we thought it would make sense as we get ready to think about the agony of watching a team play this awful Clippers team. And awful, I mean, they're really good, but I just mean awful to watch and they're all unlikable. Then pulling in somebody who just lived through it on the other side as a Mavericks fan. So thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, we just need to know if we should throw every home game or what kind of tips you've got here for the Jazz.
No, you know what? The one thing that I can say is go Jazz. My grieving period is going to extend into this Jazz series, and you better believe I'm going to be front and center rooting for the Jazz because I cannot stand this Clippers team.
Well, I'm so glad that your hatred and passion and contempt for them is so strong that you're willing to jump on this podcast in a car from the parking lot of the driveway of your brother's house using his Wi-Fi.
That's right.
Which is awesome. But yeah, I mean, I want to talk about this because I've personally hated this Clippers team from the beginning. I've hated this Clippers team from the beginning for many reasons. One, I mean, I tweeted the other day that who are the stars, quote unquote, that are less likable than Paul George? I think the list is pretty short, but people did give some good submissions. And then from the beginning, they were anointed as this great contender. It's been a hodgepodge team, and it's just a bunch of dudes that I don't care for their style of basketball. But you've just lived through it. I mean, it was an awesome series. Luka Doncic was breathtaking, and the Mavs did their, really almost stole it. As Doug alluded, nobody won a home game until Game 7, which is wild. But we kind of wanted to talk to you and just hear what you thought, watching them. Let's start with this. What about this team? We'll get to what you hate about it later because that's probably the easier conversation. What about them made you nervous? And do you have something what were the scariest things about being on the other side of this Clippers team that we have that we can look forward to?
Yeah, I think I've got 2 things that really scare me that I think that Utah should be, not equally scared because Utah's a much better defensive team, but it presents challenges for sure. One, Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi, in that series, he was doing historic things. I cannot believe how many games he shot 70%. Despite how bad the Mavs defense is, that's insane. I don't care who you are, shooting that high percentage and doing what he does is incredible. So he is one reason why I was terrified of the Clippers. I saw what he did last year to the Mavs, and he did it again in much bigger and better fashion this year.
He's nuts, man. I just want to say one thing on that point. It's pretty wild that Kawhi Leonard, the whole reason he wasn't a high lottery pick was that he couldn't shoot. And now he's shooting 70% in the playoffs. And listen, I sort of get annoyed. I feel like Jazz fans in particular, there's a segment of them that have this man crush on Kawhi Leonard just because he's stoic and quiet. I hate it. I hate his whole thing. His whole vibe. I liked him out of college. I think the fact that he never talks is annoying. It's just you need to be a human being and connect with other human beings a little bit in sports. At least I like to think. But you have to respect that he came in the league, and I was hoping the Jazz would draft him at the time. We drafted Alec Burks, and so that was a great move. But of course, I talked myself into Alec Burks after a year. But Kawhi came in, and then he looks so in control of his shot. It's a compact motion. It just feels like it's always going to go in. It's just kind of he got huge hands. He just looks like he's throwing it in a pop-up shot. And he shot 70%, and he's just silent and deadly.
Well, and the scary thing about him is he shot 70% in all of these games, and he was guarding Luka. And yeah, Luka got his stats, but there were moments where he made Luka look silly. Like, it is insane how good of a defender he is and how good of a motor he has to still be that good on offense while being that good on defense. It's just like, it was insane.
It's kind of wild though that he didn't really guard Luka as the primary defender though until kind of late in the series, right? I mean, it started maybe game 6. Interesting to see him coming off that. He like just conserves himself so much in like, you know, it's like he's in low battery mode during the regular season, and then he just does the full unleash, and he waited till like game 6 of this, and that was enough.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I can't stand the whole take half the season of rest days that Kawhi likes to do and skip practices. Like, I don't agree with any of that. But come playoff time, he shows why he's a top 5 player in the NBA.
Yeah, he was really good. I watched maybe 4 of the 7, or partially 4 of the 7 Mavs Clippers games, and it just felt like, and this is something that we've talked about a lot on the podcast, the mid-range being so scary for the Jazz. Felt like he could just take it 2 dribbles inside the 3 and it was automatic. It was going to go in every time.
Yeah.
So that makes me nervous for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Kawhi Leonard was the obvious bold top choice. Well, if you go, feel free to tack on to that one if you want. But I'm curious, is there anything else? They shoot a really high percentage from 3. But Kawhi Leonard to me is the chief headline reason. I've thought this Clippers team has been overrated for the past, its entire run. But I also thought the Mavericks were going to knock them off, and they didn't die.
Yeah, they had a chance, but unfortunately, Luka can only take you so far. You got to have other guys make shots, and the Mavericks couldn't. So
I thought I could have played Trey Burke's role. Just put me in the corner, man. I'll catch it. I'll shoot it. I don't know.
You know what? I'll tell you, that decision by Rick Carlisle really made me mad, but whatever. I'm not paid to coach the Mavs.
Mark's always trying to sneak in that 10-day contract any way you can get it.
I'm just saying, like, they break Trey Burke's your break in case of emergency guy. Like, I mean, you're not going to win at that point. So just, I don't know, take a chance on a guy like me is all I'm saying.
That's the thing. You bench a guy like Jalen Brunson for Trey Burke. It makes no sense, but whatever. I will tell you, the other thing that made me really scared about the Clippers is their small ball lineup with Nick Batum at center. Nick Batum is their dark horse player. Like, he did so many things well for the Clippers against the Mavs. He's a great facilitator. He moves incredibly off the ball, and he's a great shooter. Like, you leave him wide open. He's the guy that we, unfortunately, him and Marcus Morris, we left them wide open, and to their credit, they made shots.
Yeah, I mean, like, the thing about Nick Batum is whatever his age is, you can subtract 4 years because he just didn't do anything for his entire time in Charlotte. So he's actually like that. He's got that many more miles on him. I'm just excited personally, Doug, for the amount of times. Well, I guess we won't get him. I'm excited for the amount of Craig Bolerjack jokes I'm going to make about Bolerjack, calling him Nikola Batum like 10 times in the regular season, like he's Nikola Jokic. But this is partially though. I mean, that is the thing. Like, Nick Batum is a versatile player. There's a reason he made all that money leaving Portland and going to Charlotte. And there's also a reason why, like, when you say that, that's why I'm like, oh, this team, Nick Batum is the guy we're supposed to be scared about. Give me a break. But, I mean, dudes go to Charlotte and they do nothing and then they leave, like the Boris Diaw plan. So especially French guys, I guess. They go to, I don't want to paint with a broad brush, but I guess French guys go to Charlotte just to chill, and then they leave and they're big playoff producers. But yeah, I mean, he does fit the thing that is they're long and rangy and active defensively and can shoot. And this is one team. I mean, this is in the Doug Hema 20-50-50 rule. I think a key to this series is we got to emphasize the 50 part of that, because the Clippers are one of the few teams that shoots the ball as a team every bit as good as the Jazz, and actually had a better percentage during the season. I mean, in that closeout game, they were 20 for 43 So they hit the 20 part of the 20 rule on over 50% overall shooting, and that's an incredible percentage from three. And so the Jazz this is one of the tougher math matchups for the Jazz, and I just think the volume is going to be key. But yeah.
There was one point, McKay, where I was watching the game and the Mavs had Boban out with Kristaps Porzingis, and I felt like the emphasis on, and it was versus the Clippers small ball team, and I felt like the emphasis on more height against the small ball lineup did well for at least the 5 minutes that they were together. Do you think it, like, when the Mavs had success against it, what do you think they were doing?
Well, that's the thing. Rick Carlisle switched to that big lineup in Game 5. I mean, that's what won us Game 5 is the Clippers didn't know how to adjust to that defensively, and so we just fed Boban, and he made a heyday on Marcus Morris, and so I think that was the key. But then they started doubling down when Luka had the ball. Like Luka would force feed Boban sometimes to a fault where Kawhi would sag off Porzingis or Luka or whoever, and him and his big hands would go steal it from Boban, because Boban loves to bring the ball down and then go back up, and you can't do that against the Clippers. They swipe at the ball. And so that's the problem that we had in Game 6 and in Game 7. We had so many turnovers with that big lineup, but our small ball lineup wasn't good enough to match the Clippers small ball lineup. So I there's not really anything that we could have done there.
Yeah, here's my theory for the Jazz success, and I want to know what you think about this, McKay. Because in the game, in what I watched, I mean, everybody I think in Jazz land is nervous about the switching defense. So I think this year the Jazz have had the most versatile offensive team that they've ever had in my lifetime, in the sense of the different ways they can play. But certainly one of the books on the Jazz is lots of great passers. They get you in the pick and roll. They move the ball around. If you're going to drop the big, or if you're going to do like a hard show and not switch, I just think you're going to lose, unless if you just have like awesome players. Like the Jazz dissect that. But if you can throw out a lineup that can switch everything and force the Jazz into one-on-one isolation play, that seems to be like the book. And the Mavericks have maybe the best isolation offensive player in the NBA, at least one of the best handful of them. And so in those games, I just thought, I mean, yeah, Kawhi guarding him was tough, but they put him in a switch. He kind of got to his spots, and then he just kicked out to dudes that weren't ready to make shots. Yeah. And I think for the Jazz, the key is going to have to be Donovan Mitchell being a Luka facsimile. And I'm not going to come out here and say he is as good at doing this as Luka is. He's 6 inches shorter, but he's been so in control and so good distributing the ball. And to me, that was the key of the Memphis series, was just Donovan seeming completely playing at his pace and in control. And the Jazz just have way more shooting than the current iteration of the Mavericks.
Yeah.
That's a lot of burden on a dude who's coming off a sprained ankle. And I think the other thing that makes me really nervous is the other guy we need to do that is Mike Conley, who I don't even know if he's going to play tomorrow. Those are our two best one-on-one creators. But what do you think? I mean, do you think that's the right formula? Is, hey, if they're going to switch, it's just let's get Donovan to switch onto somebody like Reggie Jackson or whoever, break the paint and kick it out to shooters?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what they need to do. And something that I love that Dallas did later on in the series is they did a staggering pick. So, you know, Boban would set an initial pick, and then maybe Dorian Finney-Smith would come up and set a stagger pick to really get Luka the matchup that he needs. Like it would help take Kawhi or Paul George off of him and get a more favorable matchup. So if Utah learned, or, you know, I'm sure they're watching a ton of film on that Mavs Clippers series. If they see that, that's going to be best case scenario, because then you also have one of the best rim rolling, if not the best rim rolling big guy in the league. We all know how good of a pick and roll team Utah is. So, you know, Donovan, Mike Conley, you know, Jordan Clarkson, if you guys have those three running pick and rolls with Gobert, that's pretty favorable because you're going to have a guy like Reggie Jackson or Marcus Morris on your primary ball handler, and then they have to make a decision. Are you going to follow Gobert, or are you going to follow Mitchell or Conley or whoever?
Yeah, I feel like this has got to be a mammoth Rudy series, and that might not be scoring a lot each game, but I feel like it's got to be, if this goes the Jazz way, there's a couple games where he's in the kind of mid-20s, which he got in the last series too. But it just because they're not gonna. This isn't a team that defensively I feel like is gonna take him out of it. And if they do, it's because they're gonna be leaving dudes open to shoot on the perimeter. Tony Jones wrote a really good article in The Athletic about it today. That like this is sort of a career-defining series for Rudy. I mean, there's his early sort of foibles against the Rockets have kind of dogged him. I think a lot of us think that unfairly in the last couple of years, especially like the play off the court thing is a false narrative in my mind. But this is it right here, kind of, where it's like they're going to try to go small. They're going to try to take him out of it. Rudy thinks he can guard on the perimeter now. I do too. This is a series where he's still got to be able to do it, take away the pain against these dudes, and he's got to punish them on offense when they do it. I mean, to Doug's point earlier on Kawhi Leonard in the mid-range, this is a tough thing for him in the sense that the Jazz their whole defensive scheme is designed to concede the mid-range. And in a regular season game, they often get beat by these guys, or they sometimes get beat by these guys who are awesome at the mid-range, and Kawhi is one of them. I sort of think if Kawhi's going to shoot a bunch of mid-range jump shots, I like the odds of that over 7 games, and I think the Jazz adjust. But it is something to be nervous about. A little bit.
Well, here's the thing. I feel like, I mean, I don't know exactly off the top of my head what the Jazz defensive percentage against the 3-point shot is, but I know it's good, right?
Yeah.
Kawhi Leonard is the only guy that is shooting mid-range jump shots. Factor George occasionally, but we all know he's going to collapse under the Joe Ingles suffering defense. So he's not going to be a factor. So yeah, like you said, if Kawhi goes off for, even if he gets his 30 to 40 points off mid-range jumpers, no one else is going to beat you off of a mid-range game. The Clippers like to shoot threes, or they like to take it to the rim. And you've got the best rim protector in the league, and you've got top 5 3-point defensive percentage. So
yeah. To me, that's maybe the key is the Jazz have to shoot more threes than them. If he shoots a million mid-range shots, it was a less good version of this was Memphis, but it's like if Ja Morant was going to score 45 off of floaters, bless him, like, so whatever. Yeah, so be it. That we're not going to lose, 4 times that way. We weren't going to lose twice against these guys. I mean, it's obviously a better team, but if they have so many shooters that if they're getting up, 45 threes a game, then it's a 3-point contest in some ways, and that makes you nervous. What about what's your vibe on this Clippers team? It's just so funny that they were, 6 days ago, it was like these guys are going to blow up, bad team chemistry, yada yada, and then Kawhi just kind of saved the season. I mean, who are we feeling good about when they have the ball? From your I mean, Reggie Jackson, to me personally, I hope he shoots a million times. I don't care what he did yesterday, the day before, whenever. He's somebody who I would enjoy him shooting the ball as much as possible.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys that you got to feel good about when they've got the ball. Reggie Jackson's one of them. And this is coming from a team that couldn't defend, right? So Reggie Jackson had his games against Dallas. He's not going to do what he did against Dallas against Utah. It's just not going to happen. So Reggie Jackson, Terrence Mann is another guy that it was just he has no business being in this ball game. Rondo is another one that you want him shooting because all of a sudden he thinks he's a good 3-point shooter and he'll cast them.
He took a step back 3 that I watched the other day. I was just like, what the heck was that? Just him even thinking that was a thing. I don't know.
He started losing his minutes throughout the series to Terrence Mann, but I saw him cast some threes too that didn't seem very, very Rondo-esque.
Yeah. Their point guards just aren't good. I mean, Rondo's not the Rondo that we saw in Boston. Patrick Beverly has played himself off the court. He's not even playable right now.
Which makes me good because I'm like nervous. He's just out there to step on Donovan's ankle and like grab Mike Conley's hamstring weird. So like the less he's on the court, I'll feel better about it.
That's how I feel. But I hate him. I hate all the Clippers. I can't stand them. So, but those are definitely three guys that I would love to have the ball in their hands. Maybe even Luke Kennard. He saw some minutes too.
Yeah.
The whole Luke Kennard Clippers thing is bizarre to me. They paid him all this money. They never play him. Then all of a sudden they throw him in Game 7. Like, whatever. I'm more than comfortable with Luke Kennard being heavily featured, especially when he hasn't been all year.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, then McKay, since the Clippers switch a lot, this could be anybody. Say there's 2 plays in a row. One, Joe Ingles is just going to make someone look silly on a pick and roll where he keeps it and does his lazy layup where he just slow-mos it in. And the next play, they bite on that and he throws a lob to Rudy. Who do you want to get embarrassed by Joe and who do you want to get dunked on by Rudy?
Oh man. I would love Paul George to be embarrassed by Joe, and I want Marcus Morris to be dunked on.
I think we could serve that up for you. We've got
Please
Joe.
do.
Yep.
Yeah.
Marcus Morris is the biggest fake tough guy in the league. I can't stand him.
I'm with you on that. He's like the king of the, the hold me back kind of guys. Like, well, both the Morris brothers, I don't even make an effort to keep them straight because I'm so apathetic towards both of them. I don't know. Yeah, for sure. This whole team, and wait, who did you say? Oh, and Paul George. I mean, I think that's the other thing is, 7 games of Paul George. What was your read there? I mean, I've constantly been unimpressed with him, but I mean, what do you think? Like, how's he looking? How's he moving? Is he gonna have a fake injury at some point in the series? Like,
He will, because Joe Ingles is going to show him up.
yeah.
But he actually pretty well against Dallas. But again, for the umpteenth time, Dallas is a terrible defensive team. So Paul George got whatever he wanted. He got wide open threes. He took it to Boban to the rim several times, and Boban is the big friendly giant on this team. He's the big friendly giant in the league. So he's not going to do anything. So Paul George really got whatever he want. I still think he's going to collapse when there's actual hard defenders against him. I just think he's the most fake superstar we have in the league.
Here, this is more in one sense is that they play at a very deliberate pace. And I just that's one of the things that has always made me feel a little more comfortable with them. I get that. I think some Jazz fans thought the last game they lost against them wasn't great. To me, I just think I like the matchup. One of my favorite games of the Mike Conley era was last season, right around Christmas, when the Jazz went into LA and just played, really sort of foreshadowed what it could be like with Mike. And this is maybe my biggest nervous thing is just, I think he matches up well against this team. So I just hope he plays. We've had the last 2 times we've made it to the second round, our point guard has been hampered by nagging injuries. One was George Hill's toe against the Warriors, and we weren't going to beat that Warriors team anyways. But we were gonna be frisky 6 games, and one was Ricky Rubio against the Rockets, and that might not made a difference either. He played for the next year, but he was sort of in a good groove. I just want a healthy point guard. But all right, McKay. Well, this has been super insightful. I'm feeling, if nothing else, more pumped just to watch the Clippers suffer. But we just want to give you the floor. I mean, do you have any sort of parting thoughts on? I would say, with everything the Mavs went through, injury-wise, COVID-wise, etc., to have a playoff, a first-round series like that, I think is a win. I mean, Luka's amazing. The team's got some big question marks, but any parting shots on the Clippers and or just thoughts on your Mavs and their future? Be curious.
Yeah, I'll just say a quick little something about the Mavs. This is a huge offseason for them. And while I don't think Rick is on the hot seat right now, if they build a decent roster for next year, if they can build a better roster around Luka and he still can't get out of the first round. This is something Rick has been to the playoffs 9 times with Dallas. 7 of those times we've been eliminated from the first round in the first round. So at some point you got to get us past the first round. So big off season, big season ahead. That's what I'll say there.
Is Kristaps Porzingis part of it if you're the GM?
No. Yeah. But who are you gonna get for him? The dude's coming out and getting 7 points in a game 6. So I don't know. One thing encourage you to prepare for in this series. These guys get reffed like a big market team. So have fun with that. You guys are not going to have a lot of flexibility there. Kawhi, all you have to do is blow on him and he'll get a foul. And they can do whatever they want to Rudy. They can do whatever they want to Donovan. And so just be prepared. That's what I'll say. But hey, prediction, Jazz in 4. Here we go.
Let's go. We have not lost a playoff game since Donovan started playing. So my Moses Malone faux is still, under technicality. Hi, man. Really appreciate you coming on. If we, when that happens, we'll bring you back on just so we can all toast to the end of the Paul George LA Clipper era and the beginning of the Paul George trying to convince Brooklyn or LA that he belongs over there.
That's right. Let's blow this LA team up like you did a few years ago.
Hey, if there's one thing Donovan Mitchell does in the playoffs, when he just ends Paul George eras. So
there we
do
go.
It one more time. All right, man. Thanks for coming on. So fun.
See you, fellas.
Thanks, McKay.